November 14, 1965, landing Zone X-ray in Air Drang Valley, Central Highlands of South Vietnam. It was 10:48 a.m. when First Lieutenant James Riley wrote briefly in his field notebook with hands still shaking from the firefight that broke out shortly after the helicopters left. My rifle had saved my life, but I watched 3 comrades die because their weapons failed to fire. Around 14 miles west of Plamy Camp, American soldiers from the 1st Cavalry Division Airmobile Unit encountered their first major battle against a regular North Vietnamese Army force. This engagement involved approximately 450 men under Lieutenant Colonel Harold Moore's command within his 1st Battalion of the 7th Cavalry. Upon landing in a clearing at the base of Chupong Massif, they quickly clashed with elements of the NVA's 6th Regiment, initiating what would be a 3-day battle. The M16 rifle, hurriedly manufactured and shipped to Vietnam with claims of groundbreaking performance, worked perfectly for some units but catastrophically failed for others. Unbeknownst to them, this moment marked the start of one of the most significant equipment failures in U.S. military history, a systemic breakdown of trust between soldiers and their primary weapon that would lead to hundreds of casualties before Congress intervened to demand urgent reforms. The roots of this tragedy were not found on the battlefields of Vietnam, but rather in the decision-making processes of Pentagon boardrooms and American defense contractors' production facilities. The M16 originated as the Armalite AR-15, designed by Eugene Stoner in the late 1950s. Born in 1922, Stoner had served as a Marine in the South Pacific during World War II before working as a machinist and design engineer. His innovative approach to rifle design challenged conventional military weapon assumptions. The AR-15 was unveiled at Fort Benning, Georgia in May 1957. This lightweight firearm, weighing just 6.37 pounds compared to the M14's 9.2 pounds, fired a small caliber 5.56 mm round with an extremely high velocity. The cartridge itself, based on the commercial 223 Remington round, propelled a 55-grain bullet at over 3,000 feet per second. Initial trials with Special Forces in 1962 yielded impressive outcomes. The rifle's reduced recoil allowed soldiers to sustain accurate fire even when firing continuously. Soldiers could carry 300 rounds of ammunition weighing the same as 180 rounds of 7.62 mm M14 ammo thanks to its high-capacity design. Its high-velocity round was particularly effective in the close-quarters jungle warfare prevalent in Southeast Asia. Air Force security personnel quickly embraced the rifle and reported favorable results. However, between these promising initial tests and full-scale deployment lay a series of decisions that would turn this innovative weapon into a potential hazard. In January 1963, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara determined that the AR-15 outperformed the M14 and ordered the cessation of M14 production. By November 1963, he had approved an order for 85,000 XM61 rifles, despite objections from Army officials who favored the heavier M14. Production commenced in March 1964. This decision was influenced by factors such as cost considerations and the urgent need for weapons tailored to Vietnam's combat environment, along with McNamara's belief in systems analysis and modern technology over traditional military doctrine. However, the rifle that McNamara ordered was not identical to the one that had shown excellent performance during earlier testing. Changes began with the ammunition. Eugene Stoner designed the AR-15 to use IMAR 4475, a stick powder manufactured by DuPont, which generated specific pressures and a cyclic rate of fire around 800 rounds per minute. This combination was meticulously engineered to work seamlessly with the rifle's direct gas impingement system. In March 1964, DuPont informed the Army that it could not mass-produce IMAR 4475 to meet the required specifications and timeline. While this powder worked perfectly in small batches, producing consistent velocities and pressures, scaling up production to millions of rounds while maintaining consistency proved impossible due to strict requirements for temperature, humidity control, and precise cutting processes. Even slight variations between batches could impact chamber pressures and velocities. The Army urgently needed millions of rounds for deployment in Vietnam. DuPont was unable to meet the requirements, prompting an urgent need for a viable substitute. Olanmat Company promptly offered their solution in the form of UC846, which was already being used as a ball propellant for 7.62x 39mm NATO ammunition. Unlike traditional ball powder manufacturing processes, UC846 utilized a distinct technique that involved dissolving nitrocellulose in solvents, shaping it into small spheres, and then hardening them. This method proved to be faster, more consistent, and much simpler for scaling up to mass production levels. Additionally, producing a batch of WC846 required only 40 hours compared to the 2 weeks needed for IMR 4475. Crucially, Olanmat was confident in their ability to supply the substantial quantities demanded by the Army. Both parties were aware that WC846 burned differently than IMR 4475. Specifically, it generated higher peak pressures and maintained these levels for a longer duration as the bullet moved through the barrel, resulting in increased port pressures at the gas port location. Consequently, more propellant gas was redirected back into the bolt carrier via the gas tube, intensifying the action cycling process and boosting the cyclic rate of fire from approximately 800 rounds per minute to between 850 and 1000 rounds per minute. Moreover, UC846 included calcium carbonate as a stabilizer and coating agent. While this additive helped regulate the burn rate of the powder, it also led to significantly more fouling residue compared to IMR 4475. In conventional rifle designs with gas piston systems, this additional fouling could be removed from outside the action. However, the M16 employed a direct impingement system, causing all calcium carbonate residue to be blown directly into the bolt carrier, bolt, and chamber after each shot. It is important to note that extensive testing of the M16 with UC846 ammunition was not conducted before approving the switch from IMR 4475. The rifle had already been tested and approved for use with IMR 4475. The ammunition switch was regarded merely as a routine replacement rather than a significant overhaul of the weapon system. Despite millions of rounds of UC846 ammunition being produced for deployment to Vietnam, the U.S. Army continued its acceptance testing with leftover stocks of IMNR 447 loaded cartridges. The second pivotal decision pertained to chrome plating. Eugene Stoner and his dedicated engineers strongly advocated for chroming both the chamber and bore of the rifle. This was not an innovative or experimental technique. It had been utilized in artillery barrels since World War I and in aircraft machine guns during World War II. Electroplating a thin layer of chromium onto the steel surface created a resilient, corrosion-resistant coating. Chroming would safeguard against rust in Vietnam's humid jungle conditions and prevent cartridge cases from getting stuck when extracted. The U.S. military had accumulated extensive experience with tropical corrosion from the Pacific theater of World War II. Weapons that operated flawlessly in temperate climates corroded rapidly on the Pacific Islands due to their high humidity levels. Decades earlier, chrome plating was identified as a solution to these issues. However, the Army rejected this recommendation because it would add both cost and production time for each rifle. Each chamber required meticulous preparation before being plated in an electroplating bath and then inspected. This process introduced several additional steps into the manufacturing sequence. Additionally, traditionalists within the U.S. Army Ordnance feared that chrome plating might compromise accuracy, although some target shooters held the belief that chromed barrels were less accurate than bare steel. This notion had never been substantiated by military-grade testing standards. Despite warnings from the manufacturer, the decision was made to produce rifles without chrome-plated chambers, citing the expense as prohibitive. No official documentation specifies the exact cost savings per rifle, and the Army maintained that proper maintenance would suffice to prevent corrosion problems. This belief turned out to be disastrously incorrect under Vietnam's weather and combat circumstances. The third decision was equally catastrophic. Colt had promoted the M16 as needing very little maintenance, significantly less than its predecessor, the M14. This claim held true when firing IMR 4475 ammunition in controlled settings. Marketing materials and early briefings portrayed the rifle as nearly self-cleaning. The Army accepted this description without scrutiny and did not supply adequate cleaning kits or proper training to troops heading to Vietnam. Soldiers were given their new M6s with insufficient cleaning supplies, no guidance on maintenance procedures, and often received instructions suggesting that the rifle required little to no cleaning. Many were told the weapon was self-cleaning and that attempting to clean it could cause damage. This advice proved lethal when combined with the fouling properties of WCH-46 powder and the absence of chrome plating in the chamber. The fourth alteration exacerbated the growing crisis. The original AR-15 did not include a forward assist mechanism which is used to manually push the bolt into place if it fails to close automatically. Eugene Stoner had deliberately omitted this feature because he believed that if the bolt would not close easily, there was likely an issue requiring immediate attention from the soldier. However, Army Ordnance insisted on adding a forward assist, arguing that soldiers needed the ability to force the rifle into battery. This seemingly minor change later became emblematic of broader systemic issues. Soldiers relied heavily on this feature when trying to close bolts that were already fold beyond functionality. The first M6s arrived in Vietnam early 1965. Initial distribution went to elite units such as Special Forces, Airborne Troops, and the 1st Cavalry Division. These early deployments mostly used remaining stocks of IMR-475 ammunition and included soldiers who received better training and maintained their weapons diligently. Reports from these units were generally positive. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Moore's 1st Battalion of the 7th Cavalry carried M16s into the Drang Valley in November 1965. Lieutenant Colonel Moore, a West Point graduate and combat veteran from the Korean War, led 450 troops divided into 4 rifle companies. They were transported by 16 Yoche Chum Di Huey helicopters to Landing Zone X-ray in successive waves. This landing area was a clearing roughly 100 yards wide at the foot of the Chu Pong Massif, which reached an elevation of 400 feet and marked the border with Cambodia. Within 15 minutes of the first helicopter touching down, Moore's forces encountered North Vietnamese troops. The ensuing 3-day battle pitted them against elements of 3 North Vietnamese regiments, likely comprising around 2,000 enemy soldiers. Fighting was intense, often at close quarters, sometimes hand to hand. The North Vietnamese launched human wave attacks, while American troops responded with full automatic fire from their M16 rifles, rapidly consuming magazines. In this initial major engagement between US and North Vietnamese regular forces, the M16 performed exceptionally well for many soldiers. Its high rate of fire and lightweight ammunition allowed troops to carry more rounds than they would have with M14s. Moore had instructed his men to bring as much ammunition as possible. Some carried 300 to 400 rounds. During the intense close combat at Apia Mountain, this increased ammunition supply was crucial. American firepower in conjunction with artillery support and tactical airstrikes prevented North Vietnamese forces from overrunning the landing zone. Sergeant Ernie Savage, who fought there, later reflected on his experience. "I did not run out of ammunition. I had around 30 magazines in my pack and no issues with the M16. His platoon held a vital position along the perimeter throughout the battle. Though the M16 functioned as intended, Apia Mountain represented an ideal scenario for its performance. The soldiers were highly trained members of an elite air mobile division. They received superior training on the new rifle compared to what conventional infantry units would receive later. They took meticulous care of their weapons. Crucially, many of the rifles at Drang were still using IMR-475 powder ammunition, the type for which the rifle was originally designed. The firearms were relatively new and had not yet suffered from corrosion in their chambers. The disorderly nature of combat and the initial success of the operation concealed early indicators of issues that would become evident months down the line. As 1966 progressed and hundreds of thousands of M16s arrived in Vietnam, all loaded exclusively with WCH-46 ammunition and issued to infantry units with little training, a crisis began to materialize. By mid-1966, reports started coming in from Vietnam that the M16s was experiencing catastrophic failures at an alarming rate. Soldiers wrote home in despair about rifles that jammed after firing just a few rounds. Officers submitted official complaints stating their troops had lost faith in their primary weapon. Medical evacuation helicopters brought back injured soldiers who recounted instances where their weapons failed when they needed them most. The malfunctions followed a predictable and deadly pattern. After discharging 10 to 20 rounds, particularly in full automatic mode, the rifle would fail to eject spent cartridge cases. This sequence of failure became familiar to soldiers across Vietnam. When the trigger was pulled, the rifle fired and cycled normally. However, as the bolt carrier recoiled backward due to gas pressure, the extractor attempted to remove the spent case from the chamber, but it often remained stuck because of corrosion in the chamber walls and residue buildup. The small spring steel hook that is the extractor would tug at the rim of the brass case, causing the soft metal to deform under pressure. The extractor would rip through the rim of the cartridge, leaving its body lodged firmly within the chamber. The bolt carrier would then move backward, ejecting only the torn brass piece. A new round from the magazine would be stripped and pushed forward by the bolt, but it could not close because a previous casing remained in the chamber. This caused the fresh round to jam against the stuck case, locking the action entirely. When the soldier pulled the trigger, they heard nothing but a click. The hammer had struck an immobile firing pin due to the bolt being partially open. At this stage, the rifle was rendered completely useless. No manipulation of the charging handle or use of the forward assist could resolve the issue. To clear such a jam required extracting this case backward through the ejection port with a cleaning rod inserted from the muzzle end. This necessitated removing the magazine, locking the bolt to the rear, inserting a cleaning rod into the 20-inch barrel, and forcefully pushing out the stuck casing. However, soldiers were not issued these rods. The rifle was marketed as self-cleaning and requiring minimal maintenance, with cleaning kits, when available at all, usually kept in base camps rather than carried on patrols. Even if a soldier had been provided a cleaning rod, performing this clearance under enemy fire was nearly impossible due to the need for both hands and taking at least 30 seconds. Even for an experienced soldier, during which time they were defenseless. In dense jungle combat where adversaries could be as close as 10 feet away, being weaponless for 30 seconds was a fatal risk. Marine Corporal John Stevens wrote about this in June 1966. From the 40 rounds I fired, my rifle jammed approximately 10 times. To ensure I have something to rely on in combat, I carry as many grenades as possible along with a bayonet and a key bar jungle knife. If you can, please send me a bore rod and a paintbrush measuring 1 1/4 inches. It's essential for cleaning my rifle. The frequent malfunctions of our rifles are causing significant casualties among us. This desperation is evident in letters like mine, reflecting soldiers' worst fears. Fighting in dense jungle where the enemy could be just 5 feet away, where contact occurs without warning, and survival hinges on immediate firepower, only to discover that your rifle will fire a mere 5 rounds before becoming a useless club, is a nightmare scenario. In October 1966, the commanding officer of 1st Battalion, 2nd Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division submitted an official report. The new X16E1 rifles were experiencing so many malfunctions that soldiers' confidence in them had plummeted. His battalion had lost men during firefights due to these weapon failures. Troops began picking up enemy AK-47 rifles from fallen North Vietnamese soldiers because they knew the AK would work reliably even when caked with mud. The AK-47 became a formidable counterpoint to our M16s. Designed in the Soviet Union by Mikhail Kalashnikov and adopted in 1947, the AK uses a fundamentally different operating system. In the AK, propellant gas is tapped from the barrel through a gas port and drives a long piston that moves separately from the bolt carrier. This means that combustion residues do not enter the action, staying instead within the gas tube and piston. The loose tolerances of the AK also allow it to function effectively when dirty, wet, or corroded. There was considerable play within the receiver for the bolt, allowing dirt and other particles to easily escape through the gaps in its design. The magazine featured a curvature that ensured reliable feeding even if it became dented or dirty. Each component of the firearm prioritized durability over accuracy. Mikhail Kalashnikov, drawing from his combat experience as a Soviet tank commander during World War II, recognized that soldiers often could not maintain their weapons meticulously under harsh conditions. Consequently, he created a rifle designed to operate effectively regardless of how poorly it was handled. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters frequently neglected the maintenance of their AK-47s, leaving them in poor condition. Weapons were stored in underground hideouts where they endured prolonged exposure to water, mud, and humidity. They were often transported through rivers, dropped into rice paddies, or buried when units retreated. Despite these harsh conditions, the rifles continued to function with remarkable reliability. An AK-47 could be retrieved from a muddy stream, its bolts cycling once to expel any accumulated moisture before it was ready to fire again. American soldiers quickly observed this stark difference. Sergeant William Rodriguez described finding weapons that had been buried in mud and dropped into rivers or left unattended for weeks. "We picked them up, pulled the bolt back, and they fired," he noted. "Our M16 would jam if we even glanced at them." This disparity became a source of mockery among infantry units. The enemy possessed superior rifles, leading to a thriving black market for captured AK-47s. According to official regulations, carrying weapons from opposing forces was strictly forbidden. American ammunition did not fit the AK-47, and this policy aimed to prevent soldiers from being mistaken for enemies and suffering friendly fire incidents as a result. However, many squad leaders tolerated or even promoted their troops using captured AKs informally. Some soldiers opted to carry both an M16 and an AK, switching between them when the American rifle jammed. A functional AK was preferable to a malfunctioning M16, and this reality was well understood by the soldiers despite official prohibitions. The first formal recognition of the issue came much later than necessary. Reports of weapon malfunctions reached General William Westmoreland, who commanded Military Assistance Command in Vietnam, ZIM-ACV. Westmoreland found himself caught between conflicting demands. He had previously vouched for the M16's suitability for jungle warfare and requested 100,000 rifles for deployment in Vietnam. He inspected units at Drang shortly after the battle and received positive feedback about the weapon's performance. Despite his earlier praise, soldiers under his command were increasingly voicing their concerns that the rifle was endangering lives. The complaints could no longer be ignored, but addressing them meant admitting a major oversight in the procurement process for firearms. In December 1966, the Marine Corps undertook an extensive survey of 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines after several engagements where weapon failures had resulted in casualties. The battalion had recently participated in Operation Prairie, intense combat near the demilitarized zone on Vietnam's northern border. The findings were alarming. Roughly 80% of those surveyed reported experiencing stoppages during combat operations. Many soldiers indicated that their rifles jammed within just 10 rounds, and several Marines mentioned being injured or witnessing comrades killed due to rifle malfunctions in the heat of battle. Several Marines reported firing just 3 to 4 rounds before encountering total weapon malfunction. The survey detailed various types of breakdowns. Failure to extract was overwhelmingly predominant, accounting for 80% of all malfunctions. Failures to feed, where a fresh cartridge would not load properly into the chamber, made up most of the rest. Misfires due to the firing pin failing to ignite the primer were comparatively rare. The pattern of extraction failures was tragically predictable. After several rounds fired, a spent casing would remain lodged in the chamber. The extractor would tear through the rim of the case, and the rifle would become jammed. The survey uncovered evidence that proved particularly troubling. Later investigations by the I Court Committee confirmed that one Marine corporal had been killed while rushing back and forth along his squad's line to clear jams from other soldiers' rifles with a cleaning rod he obtained through an exchange with another unit. This was the only member of his squad who had managed to secure a cleaning rod. During combat, several Marines in the squad experienced simultaneous extraction failures. The corporal moved from soldier to soldier, clearing jammed weapons under fire using his cleaning rod until he himself was shot and killed while trying to clear another Marine's rifle. His own functional rifle was found beside him. He had perished attempting to keep his squad operational. By early 1967, these incidents were becoming known to the American public through soldiers' letters home describing their experiences with malfunctioning rifles. One Marine officer wrote to Senator Gaylord Nelson, "The weapon has failed us at crucial moments. Up to 60% of the rifles malfunctioned, leading to situations where Marines died mere feet from their adversaries due to jammed weapons." One Marine wrote, "Our own M16 killed most of us." Concerned families questioned whether subpar equipment had contributed to the loss of their loved ones in Vietnam. On March 26, 1967, the Washington Daily News published a major expose on reliability issues with the M16 rifle, citing soldiers' interviews and letters from troops stationed overseas. This report sparked intense public debate. How could American forces be deployed with potentially faulty rifles? Why weren't these flaws detected before mass production began? Who was accountable for prioritizing cost savings over soldier safety? The outcry compelled Congress to take action. On May 3, 1967, Representative L. Mendel Rivers, who chaired the House Committee on Armed Services, set up a special subcommittee to probe the M16 rifle program. Congressman Richard Eckard of Missouri was named chairman, alongside Representatives Speedy O. Long from Louisiana and William G. Bray from Indiana. The committee became known as the I Court Committee and embarked on an exhaustive investigation into weapons procurement practices. Hearings were held at the Rayburn House Office Building in Washington throughout May 15 to 31st, June 21st, July 25 to 27th, and August 8 to 20th. Hundreds of witnesses ranging from recently returned combat soldiers to high-ranking Army generals, from skilled engineers to ammunition manufacturers, and even Eugene Stoner himself and Pentagon procurement officials were interviewed by the committee. All testimony was given under oath and documents were subpoenaed. Technical experts provided explanations about ballistics and engineering aspects involved in the M16 program. Every facet of the M16 initiative was thoroughly examined by the committee, which reviewed procurement decisions dating back to 1963. They analyzed previously filed but neglected test reports, studied detailed engineering drawings and manufacturing specifications, and spoke with soldiers who had survived combat situations where their rifles malfunctioned. Additionally, weapons recovered from casualties, including those found next to deceased American soldiers with jammed cartridges still in the chambers, were brought in for inspection. The findings were damning. Each decision that transformed the dependable AR-15 into the problematic M16 was meticulously documented. This included switching from IMR 4475 to WC846 powder without sufficient testing, rejecting chrome plating despite manufacturer recommendations, failing to supply cleaning equipment and adequate training, making misleading claims about the rifle's self-cleaning capabilities, increasing the cyclic rate which accelerated foaling, and quality control issues at Colt that led to defective parts being shipped. Each failure was substantiated with technical data, engineering reports, and testimonies from soldiers who suffered as a result. The committee also uncovered evidence indicating that several individuals had previously raised concerns about these issues before they became widespread problems. Colt engineers protested the ammunition change in writing, while company officials explicitly stated they could not guarantee rifle performance with the new powder. Eugene Stoner included chrome plating in his initial design and reiterated its importance as the military ramped up production. Air Force personnel who successfully used the rifle with appropriate maintenance highlighted the necessity for cleaning gear and training programs. Test results indicated higher malfunction rates when using WC846 ammunition. Despite these warnings, they were overlooked or disregarded due to the rush to supply weapons in Vietnam and cost-cutting measures. The most critical revelation was about the knowledge held by Army Ordnance. They had data demonstrating that WC-846 caused an uptick in malfunctions. Furthermore, reports from Colt stated that performance could not be guaranteed with this ammunition type. The military knew chrome plating was crucial to prevent corrosion in humid conditions and understood that soldiers lacked sufficient training and cleaning supplies. Deployment proceeded month after month despite the risks, resulting in fatalities due to weapon failures. The testimonies of combat veterans were especially compelling. Marine Corporal Thomas Martinez recounted a firefight where his rifle jammed after firing 3 rounds. He detailed using the jammed rifle as a club while sustaining a bayonet wound and witnessing his team leader's death while trying to clear his jammed firearm. Private First Class David Chen described discovering an American patrol, all 7 dead with their rifles malfunctioning, and cleaning rods scattered nearby where soldiers had attempted to fix their weapons before succumbing. During committee hearings, Eugene Stoner outlined the design principles of the AR-15. It was conceived as a comprehensive weapons system requiring synergy between the rifle, ammunition, and maintenance practices. Altering any component without thorough testing would compromise this balance. Specifically, he recommended chrome plating to safeguard against corrosion in the direct gas impingement mechanism. He never claimed that the rifle could clean itself. This notion was a fabrication by marketing teams and echoed by those who lacked an understanding of the weapon's mechanics. During testimony, ballistics experts highlighted the distinctions between IMA 4475 and BUC-846 propellants. The latter produced higher port pressures, resulting in more gas and residue entering the action. Additionally, UC-846 included calcium carbonate, which caused additional fouling compared to IMR 4475. These factors contributed to a faster cyclic rate, meaning soldiers had less time to address malfunctions before jams occurred. Such issues were foreseeable. Some predictions had been made but disregarded. Representatives from Colt stated that they had documented concerns about switching to WC-846 and warned that the ammunition could not ensure rifle performance. They also noted that the increased cyclic rate contravened Army acceptance criteria, yet waivers were granted by the military. Quality control inspectors reported discovering flaws in rifles destined for Vietnam, bolt carriers with inadequate hardness likely to fracture under stress, and extractors with weak springs prone to failure when removing stuck cases. These defects were initially rejected but later overridden due to production deadlines. Financial evidence revealed another layer of the scandal. Choosing BUC-846 saved money as ball powder was less expensive and quicker to manufacture than stick powder. Olan Matson had earned significant profits from ammunition contracts. Deciding against chrome plating the chambers reduced production expenses. Although the committee discovered no direct evidence of corruption or bribery, the close relationships between military procurement officers and defense contractors clearly influenced decision-making processes. Cost savings and ease of manufacturing were prioritized over combat effectiveness and soldier safety. By August 1967, the E-Court Committee had gathered substantial evidence. The M16 malfunctions were not solely due to soldier incompetence or inadequate training. They stemmed from systematic issues in weapons procurement, testing, and deployment. Various officials and organizations shared responsibility. Army Ordnance approved the ammunition change without proper testing. The Army Material Command rejected manufacturer recommendations regarding chrome plating. Training commands failed to provide adequate maintenance instructions. Colt continued production despite being aware of existing problems. Olan Matson supplied ammunition that did not function correctly with the rifle. Pentagon procurement officials favored cost and speed over reliability. On October 19, 1967, the committee released a formal report detailing extensive findings and recommendations. The switch to ball powder ammunition was identified as the primary cause of malfunctions, while the lack of chrome plating in the chamber was deemed the secondary cause. The failure to provide adequate cleaning equipment and training was listed as the tertiary cause. The report urged immediate action to chrome plate all M16 chambers and bores, enhance ammunition designed to minimize residue buildup, ensure all soldiers equipped with MS-60s receive detailed cleaning supplies, introduce thorough training initiatives focusing on maintenance procedures, adjust the rifle's mechanics to lower its firing rate, strengthen quality control measures during production processes, hold procurement officials accountable for decisions impacting soldier safety. The investigation exerted significant political pressure, compelling the Army to alter its existing trajectory immediately. Modifications commenced prior to the release of the final report. The Army initiated standardization of the enhanced XM16E1 model as the M16A1 rifle. On February 13, 1967, the XM16E1 was officially designated as the M16A1, and it was formally adopted by the U.S. Army on February 28, 1967. The production of this improved model accelerated rapidly during spring and summer. The M16A1 featured essential modifications that rectified every major issue. Chromium plating was applied to both the chamber and bore, effectively resolving corrosion issues that led to case jams. Although adding several additional manufacturing stages, the chrome plating proved indispensable. Each chamber underwent meticulous cleaning before being electroplated with a thin layer of hard chromium, providing a smooth and resistant surface. The problem of stuck cartridge cases in corroded chambers was eradicated, significantly reducing extraction failures. A new buffer assembly restored the cyclic rate to its original specifications. This buffer system, located inside the buttstock, comprised weights and springs that absorbed the bolt carrier's impact at the rearward end of its travel. By incorporating heavier weights and stiffer springs, the redesigned buffer slowed down the cycling action. This modification decreased the cyclic rate from over 900 rounds per minute between 750 and 850 rounds per minute, reducing violent action cycling and easing stress on all components. The forward assist was enhanced despite Eugene Stoner's initial opposition. Soldiers found it particularly useful when applied correctly. This improved mechanism provided more force for closing a recalcitrant bolt. However, training stressed that the forward assist should be used only to chamber rounds quietly during loading, not as a means of forcing open a jammed action. Crucially, this redesign was accompanied by a comprehensive revision of training and maintenance procedures. The myth about self-cleaning capabilities was officially dispelled. All instructional materials were updated by Army training commands. The new doctrine clearly stated that regular and meticulous cleaning was essential for the M16, particularly under combat conditions. Field Manual 23-9 underwent an extensive rewrite to provide detailed guidance on maintenance. The manual included step-by-step procedures illustrated with photographs and diagrams. It covered how to disassemble the rifle, what parts needed cleaning, and the frequency of these tasks. Soldiers were instructed to clean the chamber and bore after each firing session. In combat situations, the gas tube had to be cleaned weekly, while the bolt and carrier required daily disassembly, cleaning, and lubrication when in the field. Comic book style manuals with simple illustrations and detailed step-by-step instructions were also produced for soldiers. These visual guides could be easily understood even by troops with limited literacy or those whose primary language was not English. The comic format featured clear drawings showing each stage of disassembly and cleaning, with arrows indicating directions for movement. The instructions were concise and straightforward, ensuring that even a soldier with limited literacy could understand them through an illustrated manual. Extensive cleaning kits were produced and circulated across Vietnam. Each kit included all the necessary items to keep the rifle operational under combat circumstances. Among these were a 3-section aluminum cleaning rod that could be assembled end to cover the entire barrel length, a bore brush featuring robust bronze bristles for removing fouling from the rifling, a specialized chamber brush designed to clean the chamber walls where spent cases might stick, and pipe cleaners for clearing the gas tube without disassembling the rifle. Additionally, cotton patches were provided for wiping surfaces clean, along with a small bottle of lubricating oil. A toothbrush-like tool was included for cleaning the bolt and bolt carrier. The entire kit was compact enough to fit inside a portable plastic case that could be carried in a cargo pocket or attached to load-bearing equipment. Soldiers were mandated to clean their rifles every day during combat, with more frequent maintenance required after extensive use. Squad leaders performed routine inspections of weapons regularly, while platoon sergeants conducted thorough examinations before and after missions. A failure to maintain the rifle was considered equivalent to other breaches of discipline, reflecting a serious attitude towards cleanliness. The message was clear: proper care ensures reliable performance, neglect leads to malfunction. New training initiatives underscored that maintaining an M16 required regular attention, just like any mechanical equipment. The misconception that the M16 cleaned itself was explicitly debunked during training sessions. Instructors provided thorough instruction on cleaning techniques and conducted stringent inspections of rifles. Recruits dedicated extensive time to mastering the disassembly, maintenance, and reassembly of their firearms until they could accomplish these tasks swiftly and accurately, even under conditions of darkness. Prior to deployment to Vietnam, soldiers were given specialized training focused on maintaining weapons in tropical environments. Crucially, there was an enhancement in ammunition quality. In 1970, the introduction of a new powder type designated as the C-8044 replaced the previous C-846 for use with 5.56 mm rounds. This new powder contained less calcium carbonate, resulting in markedly reduced fouling. The combination of chrome-plated components and cleaner ammunition effectively resolved the extraction issues that had led to numerous fatalities. These changes yielded significant improvements. By late 1967 and early 1968, units equipped with M16A1 rifles and supplied with appropriate cleaning equipment and comprehensive training reported substantial reliability enhancements. Malfunction rates fell to levels comparable to or surpassing those of other military firearms. Extraction failures, which had been a persistent problem with the original M16 model, became exceedingly rare. Soldiers who once loathed and feared the M16 began to develop trust in it. The rifle's inherent benefits could now be fully realized without being hampered by reliability issues. Its lightweight design allowed soldiers to carry additional ammunition or reduce their overall combat load. The high-capacity 30-round magazine provided sustained firepower during engagements. The weapon's controllability in full automatic mode enabled precise suppressive fire, and the potent terminal ballistics of the high-velocity 5.56 mm round proved highly effective at close range in jungle warfare conditions. With chrome-plated chambers, proper maintenance, and improved ammunition, the M16A1 emerged as the reliable weapon it was intended to be from its inception. In early 1968, the Army conducted extensive surveys among troops stationed in Vietnam. These surveys were aimed at assessing soldier confidence in the improved rifle and identifying any remaining issues. The findings indicated a high level of satisfaction among participants. Although specific percentages fluctuated based on the phrasing of questions, approval ratings ranged between 85% and 98% across various surveys. The February 1968 Department of Defense survey offered the most comprehensive data set. This particular study involved interviewing 100 soldiers and Marines regarding their combat experiences with the M16A1 rifle. Only 38 individuals, representing less than 2%, expressed a desire to switch to another firearm. The vast majority reported that the rifle operated reliably in combat situations. Most troops did not encounter significant malfunctions over the previous month of operations. When issues arose, they generally involved minor, feeding problems that could be swiftly resolved, unlike the severe extraction failures that had previously led to fatalities. An earlier survey conducted from August to September 1967, while improvements were made, showed that 85% of respondents believed the M16 performed well in combat conditions. Additionally, 87% stated they liked the weapon. A later survey carried out between January and February 1968 revealed that 85% of troops preferred either the M16 or its carbine version, the XM77, for combat operations. The remaining 15% favored other weapons, which was considered within normal variants. It is acknowledged that no single weapon can meet every user's needs under all circumstances. Nevertheless, a significant transformation had taken place. A firearm, once deemed unsafe and unwanted by many soldiers, indeed, one that had cost lives due to malfunctions during combat, had evolved into a trusted and effective tool. Proper implementation of the basic design with suitable ammunition, chrome-plated parts, cleaning supplies, and adequate training demonstrated its efficacy as an outstanding combat rifle. However, the human toll exacted by delays in addressing these issues was immense. The precise number of American soldiers who perished because their M16s malfunctioned during battles remains unknown, but it likely exceeded hundreds, possibly even more. Each death was avoidable and stemmed from decisions made far away from the battlefield, prioritizing production schedules and cost, cutting over soldier safety. In addition to the fatalities, thousands of soldiers sustained injuries while battling with malfunctioning rifles or subpar weaponry. The psychological toll was equally significant. Many lost confidence not only in their firearms but also in the organization that supplied them with faulty equipment. This issue had broader implications beyond personal tragedies, as the M16 scandal came to symbolize numerous problems within the Vietnam War. Hasty decision-making, insufficient testing, a preference for systems and statistics over human factors, and a disconnect between leadership and soldiers on the ground all contributed to this perception. For many Americans, the narrative of soldiers dying due to jammed rifles exemplified the war's overarching shortcomings. The saga did not conclude in 1967. The M16A1 continued its service throughout the remainder of the conflict, improving gradually over time. As soldiers mastered proper maintenance techniques and grew accustomed to the weapon's peculiarities, it transformed from a liability into an iconic piece of equipment. By the 1970s, veterans who had previously disparaged early models now praised the M16A1. Over subsequent decades, the rifle evolved through various iterations, including the M16A through A4 and eventually the M4 Carbine, to serve American forces for over 5 decades, and it has been adopted by militaries worldwide. The resolution of these issues was possible because they were openly identified, thoroughly investigated, and systematically addressed. The legacy of the M16 crisis had a profound impact on military procurement practices for years to come. The ICO Committee's investigation set precedents for congressional oversight of weapons programs that persist today. Prior to this scandal, weapons acquisition was largely an internal military affair. Congress allocated funds but rarely questioned technical decisions regarding design, testing, or deployment. Military and defense contractors operated with minimal external scrutiny. The I-Court inquiry fundamentally altered this dynamic by institutionalizing the importance of soldier feedback. Before Vietnam, weapons were tested primarily by ordnance experts and evaluated mainly by technical specialists. The views of frontline soldiers who would actually use the weaponry in combat were seldom sought after or taken seriously when shared. The crisis surrounding the M16 rifle highlighted that combat conditions revealed issues that laboratory tests could not identify. These insights provided by soldiers were crucial operational data rather than mere complaints. Formal channels were then put in place for troops to report equipment malfunctions. Post-war, a formal system was established whereby soldiers could submit official reports about equipment failures. These submissions were monitored, investigated, and had the potential to lead to engineering modifications or procurement changes. Analogous mechanisms were introduced across all military branches. As a result, the opinions of those serving on the front lines carried significant weight that they previously lacked. Combat testing became an essential requirement before deploying new weapons systems widely. The era of adopting weaponry based solely on laboratory assessments and limited field trials came to an end. Modern rifles, machine guns, and other individual combat equipment now undergo thorough operational evaluations by combat units in realistic scenarios. Detailed reports are filed regarding reliability, maintainability, and effectiveness in battle conditions. Procurement decisions can only proceed with positive results from operational tests. Regulations were tightened to prevent the kind of exceptions that led to the M16 fiasco. The practice of issuing waivers allowing weapons to be deployed despite failing to meet standards was closely examined. New guidelines mandated that any waiver must be documented, justified in writing, and approved at high levels within the organization. Consequently, it became much harder for defective M16 rifles to be sent to Vietnam under previous lenient conditions. Quality control inspections also became more stringent and independent. Previously, contractors were largely responsible for their own quality assurance with minimal oversight. Following the M16 scandal, government inspectors gained greater authority to reject faulty weapons, even if they passed contractor tests. The new regulations explicitly prohibited overriding inspector rejections to meet production targets. Manufacturing flaws were required to be addressed rather than overlooked. The most crucial lesson was assimilated: a weapon system must undergo testing as a whole unit. Altering any single component can impact the entire system. Cost reductions that compromise reliability are meaningless when measured in terms of lives lost. Contractor advice regarding their products should not be disregarded out of convenience but taken seriously. Complaints from soldiers on the ground needed to be promptly investigated, rather than being sidelined by bureaucratic processes. In 1985, 20 years after my own service ended, veterans of the 1st Cavalry Division convened for a reunion in Texas. Many attendees brought their families to showcase where their military careers had commenced. Among them were individuals who had fought with the original M16s at Drang and others who had encountered issues with jammed rifles during subsequent conflicts. Former Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, who carried an M16 through 13 months of combat in Vietnam from 1967 to 1968, shared his experiences. He described the early version of the M16 as a hazardous weapon. We were well aware of its dangers and had reported our concerns, but no action was taken for over a year while officials debated technical specifications and cost-cutting measures. However, once improvements were made to create the M16A1 model, it became an entirely different firearm. It was the most reliable rifle I ever used, as long as you maintained it properly. This is what the original should have been. The insights gained influenced more than just rifles. They reshaped the entire military procurement process. Testing by soldiers under realistic conditions became a standard practice. Regular congressional scrutiny of major weapons programs was established. Contractor claims were rigorously verified rather than blindly accepted. Although the M16 is gradually being phased out in favor of newer models, it will continue to serve alongside its successors for years to come. The M16's near catastrophic failure ultimately transformed into a resounding success due to thorough investigation, public disclosure, and corrective actions. This crisis highlighted several crucial truths about military procurement, and warfare reliability cannot be achieved through shortcuts. Soldier feedback must be addressed promptly. Transparency and accountability are essential for improvement. Good design can falter with poor execution, and problems can be resolved if there is a commitment to doing so. Those who perished due to M16 malfunctions in combat deserved rifles that had been rigorously tested, ammunition compatible with their weapons, chrome-plated chambers resistant to corrosion, adequate cleaning supplies and training, and leadership responsive enough to address complaints immediately. The fact that later soldiers benefited from these improvements does not diminish the tragedy endured by those who died before these fixes were implemented. The M16's tale is one of transformation. As a weapon initially derided by soldiers in 1966 eventually earned praise from them starting in 1970. What was once seen as an emblem of the Pentagon's ineptitude became a testament to how accountability and transparency could lead to improvements. However, redemption does not erase past mistakes. Those who perished due to M16 malfunctions paid with their lives for this later success. Congressional inquiries, media coverage, and public outcry were pivotal in driving change. These factors turned a flawed rifle into a dependable one, reformed procurement processes, and instituted responsibility for equipment decisions. When soldiers died from malfunctioning rifles and the military bureaucracy was slow to act, it took intervention from Congress and the press to spur progress. The IORD committee's investigation saved lives by revealing truths and insisting on corrections. Modern-day troops benefit from functional weapons due to the failures experienced in Vietnam. It wasn't perfect design that led to success, but rather a commitment to addressing problems openly and methodically. Soldiers who carried M16s during the conflict, especially those serving in 1966 and 1967, when issues were most severe, deserve acknowledgement not just for their combat duties, but also for enduring with defective gear. They battled an enemy using weapons that frequently failed to fire, resorting instead to grenades, captured arms, and sheer willpower. Issues were communicated to higher authorities through various channels. Soldiers penned letters home detailing their setbacks. These grievances ultimately led to an investigation that rectified the situation. Initially, the M16 let down American troops in Vietnam. However, America eventually addressed and resolved the issues with the weapon. This chain of failure, followed by improvement, encapsulates both the sorrow and the victory of the narrative. The tragedy could have been avoided, while the success was hard-earned. Collectively, these experiences imparted valuable lessons that influenced American military procurement for decades to come.